So I'm going to share some ideas. I want to get you discussing as well in your in small groups. So if you haven't put your yet, please put your screen on so that we can see you, because you're going to be doing chatting in groups. And as soon as we've got everyone, we'll start. Thanks, Lorna. So I don't know how you found living in a pandemic, whether you find it difficult. For some people, they seem to thrive. And for others, they seem to find it really difficult. When we went into lockdown in March, I live in the UK. I was just about to lead a conference for 100 women the weekend just that we went into lockdown. And we were really disappointed. We'd planned for a whole year for this conference, and suddenly we couldn't travel and we couldn't have it. So we decided instead to run it on Zoom. And it was incredible what God did. Of just having 99 women, we went to 150 because we reopened the bookings. Instead of just having British women, Romanian friends, we had women from across the world. And that experience on that day showed me that you can have highly relational conferences, even online. It was a great time together. If you were at that event, maybe just do a thumbs up or show me on your reactions. It was a fantastic day, and it showed me that online can be highly relational, even if it's online. And it started me thinking lots about how we do evangelism online, how we build community online when that's all that you have. But also, I think through doing that, I've learned so much about how doing evangelism online, you can have a far greater reach and a far greater accessibility, both to people that can't come to church, people that maybe are disabled, and for certain reasons, the church is just not accessible to them. But also there's a greater reach. I heard of some women in Southampton where I live, and they're Muslim women. They've always wanted to go to an Alpha course, but their husbands would not let them go. But when they heard that Alpha was online and they could go secretly from their laptops in their bedrooms, they were delighted. And they've been attending Alpha at my friend's church for weeks and weeks now online. So I'm really positive that online is a really good thing for evangelism. And I'm also really positive that it's possible to build community. I'm also aware that there are some really negative things about being online. I'm sure you've had good and bad experiences, haven't you? For me, one of my worst experiences was our weekly home group with our church. And my husband and I had an argument, and I hadn't muted the conversation. So my whole home group heard me shouting at my husband. It was really embarrassing. So there's really good online, but there's also some really bad things. And I want us just to stop and think about the challenges and the opportunities that there are to link together proclamation and community. So I was quite excited about Zoom and being online because of my experience at this conference. And so I decided that quickly in lockdown in April that I would run Facebook watch parties. And so the first one that I did, I used the evangelistic talk from my church from Easter Day, and I simply downloaded it onto Facebook. I set up a Facebook watch party, and I put it on my Facebook feed, and I said, who wants to come? I wasn't sure who would come. And in fact, the first time I got it wrong. So I said, meet 8 o'clock on a Sunday, and I got it wrong. So I had to say, come on Monday at 8 o'clock. And Monday at 8 o'clock, I had 3 of my friends attend this Facebook watch party. One was a lady that I had met on a campsite in France, but she lived 8 hours away from me in the UK. One was a PhD student that works with my husband, and one was my neighbour. And the talk was an Easter talk, so it was on and his death and resurrection. And at one point, the pastor said, do you believe that God can raise people from the dead? Yes, no, or maybe. And this was originally a Zoom call so people could interact with the speaker because that increases engagement. So my friend said, Nay, where do I answer the question? And I said, just on Facebook chat. So originally she put maybe. I put, yes, I believe God can raise people from the dead. And then about 2 minutes later, she said, Nay, if God can raise people from the dead, why are my dad, my brother, and my sister still dead? And this was on Facebook. So I said, great question, Alex. Why don't we talk about this later? I'll send you a Zoom code and we'll talk about it later. And so then we carried on watching, and she'd obviously gone to the toilet, because she came back and she said, Nay, stop the recording. I missed the prayer. And she started swearing at me on Facebook saying, stop the recording. So on Facebook Live, I had to rewind the video and play the prayer again for her. And we then went into a private Zoom call, just me and her. We talked for 90 minutes. And she said to me, Nay, I miss my dad so much. And we talked for about 30 minutes about her family. She said, if you can show me that God is anything like my dad, then I'll listen to you. And I said to her, wow, you know, I grew up in a broken family. My dad left us when we were little. I know what it's like to have a bad dad. And I've discovered in God the most incredible father you could ever meet. I said, I read to you a story from Luke 15 of this father who is much, much better than your dad. And she shouted down the Zoom call, Nay, read me the Bible, read me the Bible. So I got open Luke 15 and I started reading, and she started weeping. And she said to me, if God is really like this, I want to find out more. So I then put my gloves on and my mask on, and I walked to her house and I gave her a copy of Luke's gospel. And I said, read this. And we've carried on talking. This was about 5 months ago. We've carried on talking, and I'm trying to introduce her to the person of Jesus. And I want to show you that today we can be involved in proclamation. We mustn't forget that we can also build community, both online and in person. We don't need to just be one or the other. Ability to live in a way that, as much as we can, do things in person, be relational, send things in the post, drop something at someone's door, but don't dismiss online just because maybe you're tired and fed up of Zoom. Maybe your friends really need to find out about Jesus, and the only way to do that right now is through Zoom. And I don't really think Zoom's the problem. I think we are. And I think that's a pastoral issue we all need to think about in a pandemic. But don't let your friends miss out on hearing the good news of Jesus because we're exhausted and we can't work out how to balance our lives. And in our weakness, that's when God really uses us. So don't feel bad if you feel exhausted, but in your weakness, God really uses us. So I would love us to split into groups. Lorna's going to do that. And I want us to think really carefully about the challenges and the opportunities. I'm just going to share my screen. Give me 2 secs. I want us to think about the challenges and the opportunities that there are in evangelism online. So in your breakout groups, thinking about evangelism in a pandemic, what were the challenges and what were the opportunities? And then I'd love you to choose one person to feedback. Okay, so you've probably got 5 or 7 minutes to discuss this, and we'll put the questions in your group. So Lorna, over to you to split people up. First, we'll say hello to your group, obviously. Each other.
There are some people that can't join a breakout room because of their location, so don't worry if you can't, but we'd love for you all to go and chat.
Lorna, can you put the questions into the chat? So for those watching this online, the questions are, in the breakout rooms, think about evangelism in the pandemic. What were the challenges? What were the opportunities? And then choose one person to feedback.
There we go. Lewis, would you like to go to a breakout room?
Lorna, could you just pause the recording? Hey, Colin, nice to see you. Oh, recording now. Great, really warm welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that time together. We'd love to hear from some of those groups, what the challenges and opportunities were in evangelism. So group one, whoever you were, your nominated person, could you just unmute yourself and share with us just really briefly in less than a minute, challenges, opportunities for you? Who is that? Give us a wave, who the nominated person is, so we know you're coming. Oh, Louise, go for it.
I think we were group one. I hope so. Yeah, generally, we'd only just kind of got to the end of the first question, but our general feedback was that we found it difficult to motivate the students that we worked with to think outside of the box, and to think, to not just try and take what they'd been doing normally and then just put it online, but actually to think differently, and to not just shut themselves away because they were struggling too. Yeah, sorry, we didn't get around to talking about what was good.
No, that's great, that's fine.
Yeah.
Louise, do you mind just summarising that and popping it in the chat really briefly?
Yeah,
brilliant, thank you. Group two, who was that? Give us a wave, unmute yourself. You probably can't unmute yourself, just give us a wave and I'll unmute you. Giovanni, was that you?
I'm not sure, either 2 or 3, I can't remember.
Go for it.
Is that me? I was actually nominating Emmy to speak. Thank you, Emmy.
Sorry, we've put on super secure functions today.
Hello?
Asking you, go for it.
Hi, I think we were group 3, but that's absolutely fine. We talked quite a bit about the challenges of Zoom is great, but it's not the same as being in person. Like Giovanni was saying that they, as a church, as soon as they went into lockdown, they went on Zoom, and as soon as they came out of lockdown, they went back in person because, and both of those decisions were made for fellowship. And then also we talked about sort of the accessibility of online. So having events where people are inviting people across the world, having events where numbers are coming are much bigger because people who couldn't normally come out in person can come on coming on an evening, and speakers being able to be invited and not having to travel and all those kind of things. So yeah, that's what we talked about.
Brilliant, thank you, Amy. Okay, group 4 or 2, whoever you are, give us a wave.
And Heidi, and wave quite dramatically when it's your turn because there's a lot of.
I think it's Heidi. Oh, Heidi, yeah, got you.
Thanks, Nate. Our group was saying that the opportunities were, it was low commitment, and so even if people only had half an hour, it's quite easy just to click on a button and whop something. But that also meant there was a lot of people were anonymous. You didn't know if they'd watched or not. You might have invited a friend, but unless they told you, you couldn't follow up with them, which actually led to a really lack of follow-up happening. And so you didn't know who was interested. I think we were also saying actually people are quite tired of online formats, both for Christians involved and actually all our non-Christian friends as well, that we're longing for physical contact, and it's just not possible to do the same online as you can in person. So I think that's another challenge that we had. But we were encouraged that we did see people reading the Bible with us or coming to talks kind of in a similar way that they would have done offline.
Thank you, Heidi. Pop that in the chat. Great. I don't know how many groups there were. I guess there's at least a 5 or a 6. Give us a wave if that was you.
There were 11 groups, so we may get
Kenny
going.
Robertson, come on, Kenny, let's hear from you.
Hi, we were talking about the opportunities, saying there's an openness even in England today with the second lockdown. There's an openness, people are talking, which is good. My wife, who's an introvert, has struggled with Zoom this year, but she's actually having to isolate this week. And she said that Zoom is a lifeline. So she's realized that she's going to have to look out for people who are isolating, even though she finds Zoom hard work. It really is a lifeline for those who can't get out. So she's talking about that. I was talking about how in Scotland, we ran an online events week back in May. We had no experience of doing any online events, and it was a lot easier than we thought it would, mainly because students know how to do things online. And also you can get speakers dead easily. I was really encouraging the students to say, why don't you email John Lennox? It's not like he's doing anything at the moment, so just go and ask him. He can only say no. So just the connectedness is brilliant. It doesn't have to be just within your locality.
Brilliant, thank you, Kenny. Other groups, challenges, opportunities, give us a wave so we can see you. Who's waving? Oh, great. Aline, oh, nice to meet you. We've been emailing, haven't we?
Yes. Well, hello. So yeah, we talked also about the Zoom fatigue. So like all the classes are online, and then you also have to do an activity online, and it's getting, yeah, it's exhausting sometimes. So that's harder to reach people. But on the other hand, you can actually reach more people outside your city where you're studying or elsewhere. So that's very nice. And also, we also talked about John Lennox, actually, that you indeed could just ask him and he could say yes, because he doesn't have to come to your city. So that's easy. Yeah, I think that was it.
Brilliant, thank you. Anyone else give me a wave if you've not spoken and you'd like to share? Oh, Alice, hello, Alice.
Hi, we also talked about Zoom fatigue, and also the challenge of how do you give a gospel invitation and then follow up with people when it's online, and how do you have the same level of hospitality and community that your culture is used to physically, and it can be really hard to stay in touch with friends if you're used to going to the pub together or other things almost every day. But some of the opportunities similar are being able to invite speakers from different countries that they don't need to even leave their own living rooms, and also finding new ways of building relationships, like playing weird and wonderful online games together, and also opportunities of service as a church to financially support some people who've been struggling during this time.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Anyone else? One more maybe, give us a wave if that's you. Francesco. Welcome.
Yes, hello. We talked about the fact that everybody was online. So the effects or the numbers of our outreach were amplified by that, and also by the fact that many students went back home with their parents, grandparents, and so they were somehow reached to our online events, maybe more passively, but still they were reached. And there were challenges, of course, because of technical issues, but also because some cultures struggle more with lack of physical contact. So our friend from Mexico was telling us about that. But from Italy, we can relate to that.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So there definitely are some challenges, aren't there? And there are some real opportunities at this time. And my experience, I'm married to John, we've got 2 little girls. Our experience in lockdown is that the spirit is not in chains. If you read Contending for the Faith by Douglas Johnson, and you read about students in the Second World War, one big thing they realized is that the Spirit does not depend upon material conditions. And I felt really heartened throughout lockdown that God was at work powerfully in my life, but powerfully in my friend's life too. And for me, a real felt need of lockdown and COVID-19 was for community. And I felt that as Christians, we have the ultimate reason to believe in and offer community. So really, a close friend of mine died right at the start of lockdown. She had terminal cancer and she left behind 5 children. And so I, as her closest friend at school, decided that I wanted to help her family. So meals for her family, we tried to help source games for their garden because they didn't have much. And I became known as somebody that did stuff for other people. In lockdown, our local shops were giving away food at 9 o'clock for those who were on the poverty line. So my husband and I would drive around 9 till 10 most evenings in lockdown. And eventually my friend said to me, Nate, why do you do so much stuff for other people? Why do you believe in community? And I said, oh, fantastic question. I've got a really good reason to believe in community. And I could tell her about the God that we believe in within himself, Father, Son, and Spirit. The ultimate reason for relationship and community is from the God that we know and love. And so I'm really passionate about community, but also through lockdown, I just felt God guiding me with my reading. And I stumbled across a book called The Art of Gathering, written by Priya Parker. She's a professional gatherer. What an amazing job. And when she wrote this book, it was way before the pandemic. But as I read it, I realized there were huge implications, because how you gather says something about your gathering, and how you communicate says something about the message. Now, I don't know if you know a famous BBC journalist in the UK called Eamonn Holmes. He's really well known here. And he was in the races in Cheltenham watching the horses race in 2009. And in the race box was him, 11 of his friends and his girlfriend. Now, this man, BBC journalist, has lots of money, lots of power and lots of influence. And he looked at his girlfriend and thought, you know what, she should be my wife. I'm going to propose to her. I wonder if you can guess how he proposed. With all that money, all that influence, how would you propose to your future wife or husband? Well, for some reason, Eamonn Holmes decided to propose to his wife, girlfriend rather, by a text message. Admittedly, it was a 6-page text message. And in lockdown, my brother did the same to his girlfriend. But how does it make you feel? How would it make you feel? Put it in the chat function. If somebody proposed to you by text message, how would it make you feel? If everyone could just put a 1-word answer. Thank you, Heidi. I would say no. Yeah, 100%. How would it make you feel if your future husband or wife proposed to you by text message? I think it's a prank. Thanks, Simone. Excuse me, what? Yep, terrified to marry them. Thanks, Hannah. Undervalued, thoughtless. Thanks, Hayley. I'd say he needs to do it again. Thanks, Aline. Any emojis? Yep, thanks, Peter. Take it or leave it. Thanks, Giovanni. Disconnected, indifferent. Yeah, I mean, it's not great, is it? So my brother did propose to his now wife by text message, but it's not great, is it? And how we communicate says something about the message. What does it say that Eamonn decided to communicate this incredible marriage proposal by text? Well, all those things that you've just said there. So how we communicate shows something of the message itself, and how we communicate during lockdown says something of the message too. But I also think how we gather online or in person matters, and how we gather communicates something of the message itself. And when we went into lockdown, because of my experience at this conference, and I helped my church set up online, quickly people were asking me for my opinion about how to do church online, how to run events online. And I noticed that a lot of people just went for the easy option. They went for the thing that they knew. so streaming to YouTube or Facebook Live. And yet our church chose to go straight to Zoom, all live, all in person, all real time, from singing, speaking, praying. And it really made me question how we gather and whether how we gather really matters. And I think it does. And so what I want us to think about just for a few minutes is how we gather, because I think that's really important when it comes to proclamation and community as we think about evangelism. But first of all, I just want to share some trends that I saw during lockdown. Let me just share my screen. Sorry, 2 secs. So there were some great things happening in lockdown. You might be one of these things that I'm going to talk about now. Okay, so here are some 5 trends that I saw in online evangelism: adaptability in mission, creativity in mission, collaboration in mission, greater reach in mission, and smaller events that have a massive impact. So I'm going to talk through each one of those, and you may well hear from some of these people later on in the conference. We heard from Kenny this morning and the Scottish team with what they did. But first of all, adaptability in mission. So I saw Friends International, who work with international students in the UK. They quickly adopted online work during lockdown, and they really looked at the themes that international students were struggling with. They did some really fantastic events that both built community, but also proclaimed the gospel. So they did events on loneliness with doctors and psychiatrists speaking. They did English speaking club and cafes where you could come and meet one person one-to-one. They're doing cafes in a COVID safe way before lockdown. So adaptability in mission is really important because none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow. So there was a recent mission event in Queens in Ireland, and they planned to go in person. Then it had to go online, then it had to go in person again, and then it went online. So we need adaptability in mission. And as you think about the spring term, really have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, but in each of those, think how you can be as relational as possible in what you do. Creativity in mission, I saw this everywhere, and students are digital natives. You can give them the vision and the excitement that the spirit is not in chains, that the spirit does not depend upon material conditions, then actually their creativity could be really exciting. I saw some really brilliant TikTok videos. They're explaining about Jesus. I saw some really great panel events with all women talking about race. I saw some really good Instagram posts and live music events where people just decided to get on and put on events themselves. So think about creativity, not just your own creativity, the creativity of your group, your church, whoever it is, because they're probably far more creative than you. Third one was collaboration in mission. So we heard a bit from Kenny, but also the whole of the Balkans. So Bosnia, Serbia, Albania, Herzegovina, the one that Daniel Petrovsky did. Sorry, Daniel, if you're there.
Montenegro.
Thank you. Montenegro decided to get together in lockdown, and every Monday night they'd have an evangelistic event online. And because they collaborated, they got so many more people. It built momentum, but also their unity says something of the God they believe in. If you know anything about the history of the Balkans, even the word Balkan says something of the bloodshed and the bad historical political relationships between their countries. And yet these countries where pastors still don't even talk to each other came together online every single Monday night through lockdown, and they saw people come to know Jesus, both professors and students. So think about how you could collaborate, whether that's across a city, across countries, across nations. My fourth one is a greater reach in mission. And we're going to be hearing more tonight from Julia from Germany. But the one I want to talk about is Giovanni. In fact, Giovanni's here. So Giovanni, can you just tell us briefly, because we're going to hear a bit more from you later, just tell us 1 minute about a greater reach that you saw in lockdown through your church. Just lost you. I clicked on you and you've gone. Giovanni, you should be unmuting now. Right, go for it. Just 1 minute, Giovanni. So the greater reach that you saw in mission because of lockdown.
The greatest, sorry?
The greater reach that you saw.
Yes, I saw you had the picture as well on your PowerPoint presentation. We, as local church, were following before the lockdown a group of Latin Americans who attended our church. So having Bible studies in Spanish. So when lockdown happened, we moved that meeting on Zoom. And we told them, if you have any friends you want to invite, it's easy, just invite them. And they did invite their friends, but their friends were living on the other side of the planet. So we found ourselves as a local church in Siena, Italy, running weekly evangelistic events with people in Paraguay, Argentina, and Colombia, Ecuador. And we were able to invite speakers from the States and from Paraguay, and from Argentina. So here we are, a local church in Siena, reaching the world. Within a minute, it just happened. We found that in our hands and we're trying to make the most of it, out of it.
Amazing, thank you. And we're going to hear more from Giovanni tonight by video. So greater reach. And then finally, smaller events that have a massive impact. So my friend Gunay Lin lives in Luxembourg, and in Luxembourg, it's illegal for the Christian Union to meet on campus. It's illegal for them to hold events. And because of that, they've not held many events in the past. But in lockdown, they put on events, Has Science Buried God? They invited an associate professor who I know very well, who lives in my house, and he did a short talk on that subject. They had about 15 to 20 students who don't know Christ. And 2 hours later, I went into the living room saying, John, surely it's finished. They had question after question after question after question. So that's a small event that anyone can run from your living room, but it had this huge impact, and they're still discussing more now. So before we go into a time of Q&A, I just want us to go back to how we gather, because I think this is really crucial and it will really impact the amount of community that can be built. And I would just encourage you to be as creative as possible. So next week in our church, we've got an event called Where is God in a COVID World? And I'm doing the talk, and we've got 3 people that we're interviewing. One is the chief of 111 COVID response, and he happens to be in our church. For those that aren't British, sorry, 111 is a number that you phone to get help if you can't go to your doctors, and he runs the COVID advice service. The second person is a scientist who's researching a quick test to see if you've got COVID. And the third is someone who's lost a family member to COVID. And we're doing this event, and I'm really excited by those testimonies, but we were thinking about how we can build community. One option before we went into lockdown last night was to get people to gather in groups of 6 in their home, and for the Christian to cook dinner and to eat dinner together and then watch the event online. You might still be able to do that, but we can't. I could go for a walk with somebody and watch it on my phone. That's possible. Or I could watch it on my own and go for a walk afterwards to talk with my friend to see what they thought. That could be nice. But what we're going to do is we phoned up a local restaurant. They've given us a really good deal. And during the evening, everyone's going to order from the same restaurant. And we're getting this great deal, and everyone's going to be eating an Indian takeaway together as we're listening and discussing. And one of the reasons we want to do that is we just want to build this togetherness. And so we're thinking really creatively all the time, and we're making much more effort than ever before on how we build community online. So just a few quick points on how you do that. 1, before you even plan an event, ask the question, why do we gather? What is our purpose in gathering for this event? And when you really go back to your value, why am I holding this meeting? Why are we gathering? It's much clearer then to make a plan that actually works online or a bit in person or a bit of both. If you're struggling to work out why you gather, then maybe reverse engineer an outcome. Think of what you want to be different because you gathered and work backwards from that. So your purpose is like a bouncer on a door. You know, a bouncer, someone in a nightclub that stops people getting in. The purpose of your gathering is much more than just an inspiring concept. It's a tool, it's a filter that helps you determine all of the details of your event. So to gather online is to make choice after choice after choice. And every gathering will be so much better when you work out your values of what you want to achieve in that event. Secondly, think about who you will invite. This is really important. I'm the kind of person that loves to invite everyone, but actually I've realized that isn't necessarily the best thing. So be really specific. There are some magic numbers in gathering. 6 or less, you have high levels of sharing, high levels of conversation. 6 to 12, you have more diverse opinions, but still there is some intimacy. You get to 30 and it's like a party, and anything over 120 is just an audience. So who will you invite? Go back to your values. That determines how large you want your event to be. But also think really carefully about who you don't want to invite. And that's really important. Through lockdown, for me, being salt and light was running relentless Zoom calls for my children and their friends. And I also ran Zoom calls on for all the parents in reception year. And every Thursday we'd meet, we'd have a glass of wine and we'd chat together. And one of my friends just couldn't stop talking. And eventually I had to say to her, look, everybody wants to hear and participate. Could you just go on mute? And then I threw her out of the meeting, hoping she'd realize. And she didn't. So I had to go and talk to her. But it's really important you think through who you will and who you won't invite. Thirdly, where will you meet? There are so many platforms, aren't there? Instagram, Facebook, gaming platforms, YouTube, Zoom. There's so many platforms. Please don't just go for Zoom because it's simple. If it doesn't fit your values, don't use it. So this weekly Thursday night call with the parents, we started on Zoom, but actually we decided in the end we'd go to Facebook rooms because 90 women were already in this Facebook group. So we thought if we open up a room in this group, more people will come, and they did. And it was so much better because in Facebook rooms, you can have 2 or 3 people talking at once. There's no awkward time lag. It's just much more like a conversation, which is what we wanted to create. So where will you meet? And I would say you want to look at your students for that. Where do they inhabit? They're digital natives. I'm not. Where do they inhabit? And I would say go there. Find them there and meet there. Don't just choose a platform because you're familiar with it or because it's easy. Choose a platform that best supports and grows your values. So a venue, each venue has a script. Each venue tells you something about it. I'm currently in Oakhall Manor. It's this glorious big manor in the countryside in Kent. And it tells you something about itself. So imagine a photo of a nightclub or a beach or a law court or a business room. Imagine those photos. Those venues tell you about the meeting before you even get there. So the nightclub photo, let's have fun together. The beach, let's relax and read a book. The law court, it's official. The business room, we're round a table and discussing things. Venue is a nudge to what the meeting is about. And if you have this really awkward Zoom call where no one's talking, there's no conversation, what does it say about your values and what you want to achieve? I think we need to be much more considerate of our values before we start planning. 4, don't be a chill host. So a really good party, if you planned it in your home, in person, you do lots of planning, you'd think really carefully, be completely in charge. You'd know how to welcome people, to introduce people to each other. And I think sometimes we think, let's set up the table and it will all happen. But the best host is completely invisible, but completely in control. And I'd like to really encourage you to be a host that cares for their guests, that connects their guests, and protects their guests. And the only way you can do that is by being really well planned and completely in control, but completely invisible. And then finally, build community between events. So the difference of doing a Zoom call to doing a Facebook room was massive. And that's because all the mums were already in this Facebook group. We held a meeting in a space where they inhabited. Another example is that we used to run closed Zoom events for Passion for Evangelism. And at these events, we'd get 30, 50 people. And then I decided to put them onto YouTube, and maybe 100 people would watch them afterwards. But then when I decided to live stream from Facebook onto YouTube and Facebook Live, the numbers went up dramatically, and we had over 1,000 people watching our events, and you could see that they stayed for the full hour. So think about, when you've done an event, how do you build community between your evangelistic events? Do you want to use Facebook in a way that builds community, or WhatsApp or Instagram? Wherever it is you inhabit, use that to build community between events. Just because we're online, don't forget follow-up. Imagine in some ways you're not doing it online. Think through what you really want, how you would really love to build community, and then be creative. So right now in England, all I can do is meet with one adult. But you know what? That's a great opportunity to go really deep with one person. Normally I'd meet with 3 or 4 and we just talk about nothing. But I think in this time, God wants us to go small and have high levels of sharing and intimacy. So I hope that's encouraged you in some way. We want to leave time for questions. And I know I've not addressed something specifically, so please pop them in. Lorna's got the first question. She's going to ask them to me, but please pop your questions in for the last 10 minutes before we finish.
Thanks, Nay, for that. That was great. A lot of food for thought and a lot of inspiring and challenging stories. So we have some questions. So one of them I'm going to do first because I think actually it's quite important and tags onto the end of what you've been saying. There's so much positive things and so many positive stories about doing things online, but actually follow-up is almost impossible. Are there some tips and tricks you have for people who are finding it difficult to do follow-up? Because for some people it's a big reach to reach out. Sometimes it's difficult to leave a phone number. How can we make that jump smaller for people? How can we improve community and follow up online?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. Thank you so much. One thing I've noticed, our church is back in person, or was, and we also have church on YouTube. And I often watch it on YouTube because I've helped in the first service. And I sit there and I say, hello, everyone, who's here? Where are you from? And people start talking to me where they're from. It would be really easy to have one person as the follow-up moderator on that YouTube call, and their only job is to follow people up. So somebody from India joined our church, and if I had had the time, I could chat to them, say, can we talk later? Do you want to find out more? So I think you need to have more people that are dedicated to follow up, and look at your event and work out how you do follow up within that event. I mean, Kenny, you might have some lessons you learned or didn't learn from Scotland. Do you want to unmute if I ask you to quickly? Just a brief minute or so, Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I mean, I think we found follow-up very difficult, and I think it's partly because our expectations were wrong. So I think we kind of we had the expectation that follow-up should be done just in the same way as if you had an in-person event, but that's simply not possible, because to some extent there's no way of knowing how far the reach is of your event, because people could be joining in from anywhere. So I think, Nate, what you're saying is right. One of the things that our church has started, which I think is I'm just building on what you've just suggested, Nate, we have a 15-minute coffee and chat Zoom call after our morning service every week for newcomers to come along, and we get split into smaller breakout rooms for that. So one time I joined our church coffee and chat time and ended up in a small group with a woman I'd never met before, and just asked her, oh, how long have you been coming along? And she said, actually, this is my first time joining this. I've been watching these videos, these online services for several weeks, but today I've finally plucked up the courage to join the Zoom chat, just because somebody said, if you're new, this is specifically for you. So I joined in, and we had a great chat, and I was able to pass her on. So I think what you're saying about having some kind of join in chat afterwards, and if you can do that in a way that's as easy as possible for people to join in, so that they don't have to jump over one more hurdle just to sign in, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kenny. And so as a church, we are doing this evangelistic event next week. And after that, we're going to have a 3-series event called Discover. We did it back in June, and we had 70 people attend every event. It was an evangelistic course. So it might be worth thinking through, in the same platform, can you offer something a week later for people to join? Great. Any other questions coming through?
Yes, we do. So someone would like there to be some links for some resources. So Nay, perhaps you would be able to send me even a document that we can get out to people. I can speak to you about that later. But off that, someone wants to know, how can we motivate students who really don't like being creative, have no experience of being creative, because the amount of encouragement needed often seems impossible?
Yeah, thank you. And just to say, actually, if you've got a good answer to any of these questions, please put them in the chat, because we want to learn from each other. So I can't unmute everyone, but please just chat away, particularly to that first one that Kenny answered, and anything else. So thinking about how you motivate uncreative students. I mean, I think personally, I often look at student groups and people, and I just think you've got so much potential there. But I know personally, when I'm too stressed out and I'm too depressed in life, my creativity goes. So that might be one of those things that actually they just need a break. Maybe they used to serve in that capacity, but they can't do it online. And I think going online, some people just rise to the challenge. They're like entrepreneurs and they do new things and it gets them really excited. And others, it's just overwhelming. Another trend I saw in lockdown was that God is raising up new leaders. So maybe there's new people around that you've not yet seen that have gifts that you don't have seen. But creativity is a God-given thing. So there must be creativity in your groups. As a woman myself, and speaking on behalf of nervous men, I think sometimes people just need to be asked. So you need to look at these people. What are they sharing on Instagram? What are they sharing on Twitter? What's natural in their lives? What can't they stop themselves doing? Give them a call and say, you know what, I noticed that you did this thing and it was really good. Would you consider writing something up for me? Would you consider doing that? And in my job, that's what I do all the time. I talent spot women across Europe. And I give them a ring and I encourage them, I get them some training, and then they fly on their own. So I just think if it's a God-given gift, it's somewhere, but you might have to work hard and love them and hold their hand a bit as you do it with them. Great,
thanks, Nay. So we also have a question about Zoom fatigue. So we've had a lot of lockdowns. Lockdowns are still coming, and they don't seem to end anytime soon. Some of them are a bit more intense than the first time round. How can we encourage ourselves, each other, and our students to keep going in this next phase of the pandemic?
Great. So don't do everything on Zoom, as I've been saying. Find the platform that they love, that they inhabit. They don't love and inhabit Zoom. And Zoom is not made actually for this. Zoom is now used for these things, but it wasn't originally made for this. Where you don't need to use Zoom, don't. So if I'm speaking to somebody one-to-one, I give them a ring on the mobile phone, you know, that thing we used to have. I don't use WhatsApp, I just phone them or I see them in person. I would never do a Zoom meeting for more than 45 minutes. I refuse to, I just leave. And I think one of the tiring things about Zoom is we're tired of looking at ourselves the whole time. It's just exhausting. So hide your self-view. That's what I do in meetings, so I don't look at myself, looking at other people. It's just exhausting. There have been some really healthy things written by Mind and Soul Foundation, by Cal Newport. He writes a lot. I can put these links in later. But Zoom fatigue is real, but interestingly, if you put Zoom fatigue into Google Trends, it's just real in North America, UK, and parts of Europe, which is fascinating. So I think it's about self-care for yourself. We need to help students and pastor and disciple them in new ways in a pandemic. And also, friends Tina DePatter in IFES did some excellent webinars on self-care, so you can find them on the IFES Facebook.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for just this one last question. So FEUER is all about mission weeks and how we can declare the gospel on our university campuses. But as part of that, we have lots of different components. We have flyering, we have going and knocking doors, we have our main talks, we have lunches, we have so many different things. But we can't do all of that online, and you've already touched a little bit on that. But are there certain things that you think just don't work online? What is better to keep to real life for maybe after online events as well?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and please put your answers in. I think there's some questions we need to ask ourselves, and I'd encourage you to go away and do this. What should you stop doing? What should you start doing? And what should you continue doing? I really see this as a unique period in IFE's history. The students in Second World War saw that the spirit was not in chains. I can really clearly see in my own life that the spirit is not in chains. So my friend that died of cancer, 3 days before she died, she gave her life to Christ. I've been her friend for 6 years. I prayed for her. I talked to her. I'd really served and loved her family, and I still do now. 3 days before she died, she came to know Christ. This is a moment to offer hope and life, but you need to work out really strategically what you need to stop doing, continue doing. And I think some of the movements that are really thriving across Europe right now are those that have made some bold choices to stop doing a lot of stuff, to continue doing some things and to start doing just one or two things. So I hope those questions are helpful. You need to meditate on those with your students and staff and let the students lead and thrive in their creativity. Thanks, Lorna.
That's great. Thanks, Nay, and thanks everyone for coming. I hope that you've been inspired. I hope you've been challenged. We would love to continue to have us join us at FEUER over this evening and the rest of the week. So please do join in at the main session in 1 hour's time. Enjoy and keep on sharing the good news of Jesus with your friends. And Nay, you've been amazing. We're always privileged to hear you. We're always privileged to hear what you have to share. And as an individual, you're always encouraging us. And so we thank you for that and for the work that you've put into your seminar this afternoon. So enjoy some computer-free time for the next hour, everyone. And we'll see you back at 6:30 UK time, 7:30 Central European time. So take care. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.